Welcome, dear listeners, to a place where stories find their heart, where whispers of the past echo into our present. Settle in, let the world outside fade, and journey with us to a time of hardship and unexpected grace. Today, we share a tale of a love forged in the crucible of winter's cruelest breath, a testament to the quiet strength that can blossom in the most desolate of souls. If you believe in the enduring power of connection, if you find solace in stories of resilience, then subscribe, share this journey, and let us know in the comments below from what corner of the world you're tuning in. Your presence here weaves you into the tapestry of these timeless narratives. Now, let the wind carry us back, to a land of stark beauty and starker realities, where a lonely rancher was about to find more than he ever bargained for at a frostbound station, unaware that the frozen wisp of a woman he'd discover was destined to become his wife, his world, his forever. The wind, a razor sharpened on the teeth of the mountains, scoured the skeletal platform of the Redemption Gulch train station. It was less a station and more a forlorn suggestion of one, a clapboard shed, paint flayed by seasons of pitiless sun and ice, and a single, frost-heaved track that vanished into the bruised purple of the encroaching dusk. Snow, fine and granular as salt, hissed across the weathered planks, piling in drifts against the thin walls of the shed, seeking out every crack, every imperfection, with the tenacity of a starving wolf. Inside this fragile shell, huddled in a corner where the wind's assault was marginally blunted, was Ilara. She was a whisper of a woman, a collection of bones draped in threadbare wool, her face a pale smudge against the deeper shadows. The cold had leached all color from her, leaving her lips a faint blue, her skin the translucent white of hoarfrost on a winter windowpane. Her breath was a shallow, almost invisible mist. She had been there for hours, perhaps a day. Time had become a meaningless, frozen expanse. The last coins, clutched tight until her fingers were numb, had bought her a ticket to this desolate junction, a place she prayed was far enough, a place where the echoes of Theron's voice, raw and brutal, could no longer reach her. Her husband, Elias, had been a cruel man, his heart a stone, his hands quick to anger. His death had brought no release, only the sharpened malice of his brother, Theron, who saw in Ilara not a grieving widow, but a possession, an object upon which to vent the family's bitterness and greed. They had taken everything, the small, hard-won comforts of her married life, meager as they were, and then they had cast her out, her body aching from Theron's parting blows, her spirit a fragile, flickering ember. "Go, and may the coyotes find you before the snow does," Theron had spat, his eyes glittering with a cold triumph. She had stumbled away, clutching a small, worn wooden bird charm, a relic from a childhood she barely remembered, its smooth surface the only comfort in a world that had offered none. Now, that charm was pressed deep into her palm, a tiny anchor in an ocean of despair. The cold was a living thing, seeping into her marrow, stealing the last vestiges of sensation. A dull lethargy was creeping over her, a dangerous siren song promising an end to the pain, to the fear, to the gnawing emptiness. She thought, dimly, of her mother, a faded image of warmth and gentle hands, a lifetime ago. A single tear escaped, freezing instantly on her cheek, a tiny diamond of sorrow. She was so tired. So very, very tired. The world was shrinking, the howl of the wind becoming a distant lullaby. Silas Blackwood approached the Redemption Gulch station with the steady, unhurried gait of a man accustomed to the vast silences and indifferent moods of the land. His ranch, a sprawling, lonely spread nestled in the foothills, demanded a self-reliance that had etched itself into the lines around his eyes and the set of his jaw. He was a man of stone and timber, tall and broad-shouldered, his face weathered by sun and wind, his eyes the color of a winter sky, clear and discerning. He'd come for the monthly supply train, though the worsening blizzard made its arrival uncertain. The air was thick with driven snow, visibility shrinking with each gust. As he neared the dilapidated shed, a flicker of movement, or perhaps a distortion in the swirling white, caught his eye. It was nothing, he told himself, likely just the wind playing tricks with a loose shutter or a discarded piece of canvas. Yet, an unease settled upon him, a subtle prickling that years of solitude had taught him to heed. He tethered his horse, the animal snorting plumes of steam into the biting air, and pushed open the groaning shed door. The interior was choked with shadows and the bone-deep chill of abandonment. Then he saw her. A bundle of rags, almost indistinguishable from the accumulated debris in the corner. For a moment, he He thought she was dead, another forgotten soul claimed by the harshness of this frontier. But as his eyes adjusted, he saw the faint, almost imperceptible rise and fall of her chest. He moved closer, his heavy boots making no sound on the dirt floor. He knelt, his gaze taking in the bruised hollows beneath her eyes, the stark white of her skin, the way she was curled in on herself, a desperate attempt to conserve some fading spark of life. Her hands were raw, chapped, one clutched so tightly it seemed frozen in place. He saw the edge of something wooden peeking from her grasp. Compassion, a rare and deeply buried emotion in Silas's guarded heart, stirred. He had known loss, the stark emptiness of a home silenced by death. His own wife, Martha, taken by fever 5 years gone, still lived in the quiet corners of his memory. He saw in this woman not a stranger, but a reflection of a pain he understood. He reached out a gloved hand, hesitating before gently touching her shoulder. His voice was low, rough from disuse, yet carrying an unexpected gentleness. Ilara didn't stir, her stillness terrifying. He pressed his fingers to her neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, thready and weak, but present. A flicker of relief, quickly followed by a sense of urgency. She wouldn't last much longer out here. The train, if it came at all, would be too late. He made his decision with the swift, quiet certainty that defined him. He couldn't leave her. It wasn't in his nature. He carefully, gently, scooped her into his arms. She weighed next to nothing, a fragile burden. Her head lolled against his chest, a faint, almost inaudible sigh escaping her lips. It was a sound of such profound exhaustion, such utter surrender, that it tightened something in Silas's chest. He carried her out into the swirling snow, the wind tearing at them, trying to reclaim its prize. He settled her onto his horse, in front of him, cradling her against his body, trying to shield her from the worst of the storm with his own bulk. He wrapped his thick oilskin coat around her as best he could, pulling her deeper into its inadequate warmth. Her hair, the color of damp straw, was frozen in places, tendrils clinging to his rough wool shirt. He could feel the tremors that racked her small frame, the icy chill of her skin even through layers of clothing. He urged his horse forward, away from the desolate station, towards the distant, uncertain promise of his solitary ranch. The journey was a battle against the elements, each gust of wind a physical blow, each drift of snow a treacherous obstacle. Silas rode with his head bowed, his body a bulwark against the storm, the woman in his arms a silent, freezing weight. He didn't know who she was, or what misfortunes had brought her to this desperate pass. He only knew that she was alive, and for now, that was enough. The wind howled its mournful song around them, the snow fell like a shroud, but within the circle of his arms, a tiny, almost extinguished flame of life was being painstakingly, determinedly, sheltered. He was unaware, as he pressed on through the blinding white, that he was carrying not just a stranger, but his future, a future that would reshape the contours of his lonely existence in ways he could not yet imagine. The stone in his heart, long dormant, felt the faintest, unfamiliar tremor, like the first crack of ice in a spring thaw. The journey to Silas's ranch was a blur of biting wind and numbing cold for Ilara, punctuated by fleeting moments of awareness. She felt the solid strength of the man holding her, the rhythmic sway of the horse, the rough texture of his coat against her cheek. These sensations were distant, filtered through a haze of exhaustion and encroaching unconsciousness. There was a primal sense of safety in his hold, a stark contrast to the terror she had fled. When they finally reached the ranch, a collection of sturdy log buildings hunkered down against the vast, snow-swept landscape, she was barely lucid. Silas carried her inside the main cabin, the sudden warmth a shock to her frozen limbs. The cabin was Spartan, masculine, yet immaculately clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth swept clean, ready for a fire. A simple wooden table and 2 chairs stood in the center of the room, a well-worn armchair near the hearth. A narrow doorway led to what she assumed was a bedroom. There was an air of quiet order, of a life lived with methodical care. Silas laid her gently on a thick bearskin rug before the fireplace. He moved with an economy of motion, his actions purposeful. He built a fire, the kindling catching quickly, the flames leaping up to lick at the larger logs, casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls. The scent of pine and wood smoke filled the air, a comforting, elemental smell. While the fire gained strength, he disappeared briefly and returned with a basin of lukewarm water and soft cloths. He knelt beside her, his expression unreadable in the flickering light. Elara flinched instinctively when he reached for her, a small, animal sound of fear escaping her. Her eyes, wide and haunted, met his. Silas paused, his hand hovering. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice still low, but steady. "Just need to get you warm." The cold set in deep. He moved slowly, his touch surprisingly gentle as he began to chafe her frozen hands, then her feet, working to restore circulation. He was careful, respectful, his gaze focused on his task, never lingering. He managed to remove her sodden, frozen boots and the outer layers of her clothes, which were stiff with ice. Underneath, her dress was thin, offering little protection. He found a thick wool blanket and wrapped her in it, tucking it snugly around her. He then ladled broth from a pot that had been simmering at the back of the stove, the aroma of herbs and slow-cooked meat filling the small cabin. He held the cup to her lips, patiently helping her sip the warm liquid. It was the first real nourishment she'd had in days, and it sent a fragile warmth spreading through her chilled core. Each spoonful was an agony of returning sensation, but also a lifeline. She watched him through slitted eyes, suspicion and fear warring with a desperate gratitude. He was a stranger, a mountain of a man whose quiet intensity was unnerving. Yet, he had saved her. He had shown her a kindness she hadn't known in years, perhaps ever. Why? What did he want? Men, in her experience, always wanted something. As the warmth seeped into her, pain began to throb in her frost-bitten fingers and toes, a fierce, burning ache. Tears welled, unbidden, and spilled down her cheeks. Silas said nothing, but he gently dabbed at her face with a soft cloth, his touch impersonal yet comforting. He sat back on his heels, watching the fire, giving her space. The silence in the cabin was broken only by the crackle of the flames and the moan of the wind outside, a constant reminder of the fury she had escaped. Elara remained cocooned in the blanket, her body trembling, not just from cold, but from the emotional storm raging within her. The wooden bird charm was still clutched in her hand, its familiar shape a small point of reality in the overwhelming strangeness of her situation. She drifted in and out of a restless sleep, plagued by fragmented nightmares, Theron's face, contorted with rage, Elias's heavy hand, the endless, biting cold. Each time she startled awake, her heart pounding, she would find Silas nearby, either tending the fire, or sitting in his armchair, a book open in his lap, though she doubted he was reading. He seemed to be simply watching over her. His presence was a silent reassurance, a steady anchor in the terrifying darkness of her memories. Days bled into weeks. The blizzard eventually exhausted itself, leaving behind a world sculpted in pristine white, beautiful and unforgiving. Elara slowly began to heal, her physical wounds mending, the frostbite receding, leaving her fingers and toes tender and aching. The deeper wounds, the scars on her soul, were slower to fade. She remained quiet, speaking only when necessary, her voice a mere whisper. She moved about the small cabin like a ghost, flinching at sudden movements or loud noises. Silas gave her space, never pressing, never demanding. He provided food, warmth, and a quiet, unobtrusive presence. He would leave her food by the fire if she was asleep, and continue with his chores around the ranch, tending to his few hardy cattle, chopping wood, mending fences. His routine was predictable, his manner consistent. This predictability became a fragile lifeline for Elara. She began to observe him, this quiet, solitary man. She noticed the way he mended his own clothes with surprising neatness, the gentleness with which he treated his animals, the way his calloused hands could be so careful. She saw the lines of sorrow etched around his eyes, the faint sadness that clung to him like the scent of wood smoke. One afternoon, while Silas was out checking his trap lines, Elara found herself drawn to a small, dusty shelf in the corner. Among a few worn books, there was a faded photograph in a simple wooden frame. It was a woman, her smile gentle, her eyes kind, standing beside a younger, softer version of Silas. A wedding photograph. Martha. So, he too knew the sting of loss. This realization forged a tiny, unspoken connection. She began to emerge from her shell, hesitantly at first. She started by tidying the cabin, her movement small and uncertain. She swept the floor, dusted the sparse furniture, washed the few dishes with water heated on the stove. These simple acts of domesticity were familiar, grounding. Silas would return to find the cabin subtly changed, a touch of order she had brought. He never commented directly, but she would sometimes see a flicker of surprise, perhaps even approval, in his eyes. One day, she found a basket of his mending, a torn shirt, a pair of socks riddled with holes. She picked them up, her fingers tracing the worn fabric. She found a needle and thread in a small tin box on the mantelpiece and, sitting by the fire, began to repair the items. Her stitches were small and even, a skill learned in a childhood that felt a lifetime away. When Silas returned, he found her absorbed in her task, the firelight casting a warm glow on her bent head. He stopped in the doorway, watching her for a long moment, an unreadable expression on his face. She looked up, startled, expecting disapproval, perhaps anger. Instead, he merely nodded, a slight inclination of his head. "Thank you," he said, his voice quiet. It was the first time he had directly acknowledged her efforts. Ilara felt a flush creep up her neck. She simply nodded in return, her gaze dropping back to her sewing. Slowly, haltingly, a fragile rhythm established itself between them. She cooked simple meals with the supplies he provided, the act of nourishing him a strange comfort. She cleaned, mended, brought a quiet order to the rugged masculinity of his home. She found a small patch of earth near the cabin, sheltered from the worst of the wind, where a few hardy herbs had somehow survived the winter. She began to tend to them, her fingers gently clearing away the snow, her touch coaxing life from the frozen ground. It was a small act of creation, of hope. Silas, in turn, continued to provide for her, to protect her. He chopped extra wood, ensuring the cabin was always warm. He shared his meager supplies without reservation. He never asked about her past, never pried into the source of the fear that still shadowed her eyes. He simply accepted her presence, this silent, wounded woman who had appeared in his life like a bird fallen from a storm. There were long periods of silence between them, but they were no longer fraught with tension. They were comfortable silences, filled with the small sounds of shared existence, the crackle of the fire, the clink of a spoon against a bowl, the soft scratch of her needle through fabric, the rustle of pages as he read. One evening, as a Chinook wind whispered promises of a distant spring, Ilara found her voice. She had been staring into the fire, the wooden bird charm turning over and over in her fingers. "My husband?" "Elias, he died," she said, her voice barely audible, husky from disuse. Silas looked up from the harness he was mending. He didn't speak, just waited, his gaze steady, patient. "His brother. Theron. He blamed me. He was cruel." The words came out in a torrent, then stopped, as if the effort was too much. Silas set down his work. "You're safe here, Ilara," he said, his voice calm, firm. He had learned her name from a faint, almost erased inscription inside a tattered Bible she kept by her pallet. It was the first time he had spoken it aloud to her. Hearing her name, spoken with such quiet certainty, such simple assurance, was like a balm to her raw spirit. She looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw not just a protector, but a good man, a man of honor. A fragile tendril of trust, tentative and new, began to unfurl within her. She didn't tell him everything, not yet. The shame and the horror were still too raw, too close. But she had taken a step, a crucial step, out of the frozen silence of her trauma. The community of Redemption Gulch, small and insular, had, of course, noticed Silas Blackwood's prolonged absence after the great blizzard, and then his infrequent visits to the general store, his face more shuttered than usual. Whispers had begun, as they always did in such places, like dry leaves skittering before a storm. "Saw Blackwood in town. Looked like he'd seen a ghost. Heard tell he ain't alone up there no more. A woman, they say. Hiding her away, is he?" The storekeeper, a portly man named Henderson with eyes that missed nothing, had tried to pry. Rough winter, Silas. Need anything extra? For company? Silas's gaze, cold as a January wind, had silenced him. But the seeds of curiosity and suspicion had been sown. The shifting chorus was beginning to tune its voice, its melody still uncertain, but leaning towards judgment. Ilara knew nothing of these whispers. Her world was the cabin, the small yard, the vast, silent expanse of snow-covered mountains. But sometimes, when the wind carried sounds from afar, a distant dog's bark, the faint rumble of a wagon on the frozen road miles away, a prickle of unease would touch her. The past was a shadow, and shadows had a way of stretching, of reaching, even into the most remote sanctuaries. She would clutch her wooden bird, its smooth surface a small comfort, and draw closer to the fire, seeking solace in the steady, unassuming presence of the quiet man who had offered her a refuge, a chance to heal, a fragile hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the ice around her heart might one day truly melt. He had asked for nothing in return, this quiet protector, and in that selfless offering, he had given her more than she had ever dared to dream, a flicker of warmth in the unending winter of her soul. Spring arrived tentatively in the high country, a hesitant blush of green on the south-facing slopes, the roar of melting snow swelling the creeks. The air, though still crisp, carried the scent of damp earth and new life. With the changing season, Ilara found herself changing too. The haunted look in her eyes began to recede, replaced by a cautious curiosity. A little color returned to her cheeks. She still moved quietly, but her steps were less furtive, more assured. She even hummed sometimes, soft, forgotten melodies, as she worked in the small herb garden she had coaxed into vibrant life. Silas watched these subtle transformations with a quiet satisfaction he didn't voice. Her presence had filled a void in his solitary existence he hadn't fully acknowledged until she arrived. The cabin felt warmer, more alive. The aroma of her baking, the sight of her mending by the fire, the soft sound of her movements, these small things had become integral to his days. He found himself looking forward to returning from his work, a novel feeling. His admiration for her resilience, her quiet strength, grew with each passing day. He saw the scars she carried, not just the fading bruises from her arrival, but deeper ones, etched into her spirit. Yet, she persevered. She was like a willow, battered by storms but refusing to break, her roots sinking deeper, finding purchase in the rocky soil of her new life. One afternoon, Silas returned from a long ride checking fence lines to find Ilara not in the cabin, but sitting on the porch step, her face turned towards the sun-drenched valley. She had a small wildflowers, vibrant blues and yellows, tucked into her hair, a splash of color against its pale flaxen. She turned as he approached, and for the first time, she offered him a small, genuine smile. It was like the sun breaking through clouds, transforming her face, hinting at a beauty that sorrow had long suppressed. "Welcome home, Silas," she said, her voice soft, but clear. The simple words, the unexpected smile, struck him with a surprising force. He merely nodded, a lump forming in his throat, and busied himself with unsaddling his horse, his usual composure momentarily unsettled. That evening, the silence between them felt different, charged with an unspoken awareness. The fragile peace they had cultivated, however, was about to be shattered. A lone rider appeared on the distant ridge late one afternoon, a dark silhouette against the fiery sunset. Ilara, who had been gathering herbs near the creek, saw him first. A cold dread, sharp and familiar, pierced through her. The rider was too purposeful, his posture too arrogant. He rode not like a lost traveler, but like a man with a grim destination. Her breath caught in her throat. She knew, with a chilling certainty, even before he was close enough to discern his features, who it was. Theron. The ghost of the past had found her. Panic seized her, stark and overwhelming. Her first instinct was to run, to hide, to disappear back into the wilderness. She stumbled back towards the cabin, her carefully tended basket of herbs falling unheeded, its contents scattering on the ground. "Silas!" Her voice was a strangled cry, raw with terror. Silas was splitting wood by the side of the cabin, the rhythmic thud of his axe a familiar sound. He looked up, his axe mid-swing, at the desperate urgency in her voice. He saw the rider then, still distant but drawing inexorably closer. He saw the blood drain from Ilara's face, the way she swayed, her eyes wide with a terror that clawed at his own heart. He dropped the axe and was at her side in 3 long strides, his hand steadying her arm. "Who is it, Ilara?" he asked, his voice low, but with an edge of steel she hadn't heard before. It's him," she whispered, her teeth chattering. "Theron. Elias's brother. He's come for me." The words were a death knell to the fragile hope she had nurtured. Silas's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as he watched the approaching figure. He had known, on some level, that her past might one day intrude. He had seen the lingering fear in her, the way she startled at unexpected sounds. He had hoped, perhaps foolishly, that this remote valley would be sanctuary enough. Now, the threat was here, tangible and menacing. He felt a cold rage begin to smolder within him, a protective instinct so fierce it surprised him. He had offered this woman shelter, he would not see her dragged back into the darkness she had escaped. "Go inside, Ilara," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "Stay away from the window." She looked at him, her eyes pleading. "Silas, you don't understand. He's a monster. He'll hurt you. He won't lay a hand on you," Silas stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. It was not a boast, but a simple statement of fact. He gently guided her towards the cabin door. "Go." Reluctantly, she obeyed, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She paused at the threshold, looking back at him, his silhouette framed against the dying light, a solitary figure ready to face the encroaching darkness. He looked like a guardian, carved from the very stone of the mountains, immovable, implacable. The rider was closer now, the thud of his horse's hooves a menacing drumbeat. "Theron." His face, lean and cruel, was set in a sneer of grim satisfaction. He reined in his horse a few yards from Silas, his eye sweeping over the cabin, lingering on the doorway where Ilara had disappeared, before settling on Silas with cold disdain. "Blackwood, I presume," Theron said, his voice carrying a grating arrogance. "I'm looking for something that belongs to me. A runaway woman. My brother's widow." Ilara. Silas stood his ground, his arms crossed over his chest, his expression unyielding. "There's no one here by that name who belongs to you." Theron's eyes glittered. "Don't play games with me, rancher. I know she's here." The gossips in that pathetic excuse for a town down the valley were quite informative. "Seems you've taken a fancy to my brother's leavings." The insult hung in the air, sharp and ugly. Silas's gaze remained steady, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "The lady is under my protection." "You have no claim on her protection." Theron laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "She's family property. Bound by law and custom. She belongs with us. She has duties. Ilara, who had been listening from just inside the door, her hand pressed to her mouth to stifle a sob, could bear it no longer. Pushing the door open, she stepped out, her fear a palpable wave, but a spark of defiance now kindling in her eyes. Silas moved slightly, positioning himself partly in front of her. "Theron, you have no right. Elias is dead. I owe you nothing." Theron's sneer widened as he saw her. "Ah, there she is. Looking a bit healthier than when I last saw her. The mountain air agrees with you, Ilara. Or perhaps it's the company." His gaze flicked contemptuously towards Silas. "But playtime is over. You're coming back where you belong." "I will not," Ilara said, her voice trembling but firm. She clutched the wooden bird charm in her pocket, its familiar shape a small anchor. "You tormented me. You and Elias." "I will not go back to that." "Tormented?" Theron feigned surprise. "We provided for you. Gave you a home. This is how you repay us? By running off like a thief in the night with some backwoods brute." His eyes narrowed. "Perhaps you need a reminder of your place, Ilara. A reminder of how we deal with ingratitude in my family." He made a subtle movement, his hand drifting towards the riding crop tucked into his belt. Silas stepped forward, his body a solid shield between Ilara and Theron. "You will not touch her," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. This is my land. She is my concern. You will leave. Now Theron's face darkened with fury. He was not used to being defied. You think you can stop me, old man? She's mine by right. And if you interfere, you'll regret it. He swung down from his horse, his boots thudding heavily on the packed earth. He was shorter than Silas, but wiry and quick, with an air of vicious intent. The confrontation, long dreaded, long feared, had arrived, casting a dark shadow over the fragile peace of the small cabin and the two souls who had found an unlikely sanctuary within its walls. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of blood and fire, a dramatic backdrop for the clash of wills that was about to unfold. The air crackled with a palpable tension, thick and suffocating as a summer storm. Theron took a swaggering step towards Ilara, his lips curled into a predatory smile. Come now, Ilara. Don't make this difficult. We have unfinished business, you and I. His eyes held a cruel gleam, a promise of pain that made her stomach clench. Before he could take another step, Silas moved with surprising speed for a man his size. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make a threat. He simply interposed himself fully between Theron and Ilara, his presence an immovable barrier. I said, leave, Silas reiterated, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very ground. His eyes, the color of a winter storm, were fixed on Theron, unwavering and utterly devoid of fear. Theron, incensed by this quiet defiance, scoffed. You think you're some kind of hero, rancher? Protecting damaged goods. He gestured contemptuously towards Ilara. She's nothing. A burden Elias was too soft to manage properly. I intend to rectify his mistakes. He reached out, intending to shove Silas aside. Silas's hand shot out, clamping around Theron's wrist like a band of iron. Theron gasped, surprised by the strength in that grip, his arrogant smirk faltering. I will not tell you again, Silas said, his voice dropping even lower, each word laden with a chilling finality. The pressure on Theron's wrist increased, grinding bone against bone. Pain, sharp and undeniable, shot up Theron's arm. His face contorted, his bravado crumbling. Let go of me, you damn savage, he hissed, trying to wrench his arm free, but Silas's grip was unyielding. Ilara watched, her heart hammering. Fear still coiled within her, but seeing Silas stand so resolutely, so powerfully in her defense, ignited a spark of courage she hadn't known she possessed. The years of abuse, of silent suffering, of being made to feel worthless, coalesced into a single point of burning indignation. His right, Theron, she said, her voice clearer now, stronger. She stepped out from behind Silas, her chin held high, though her body trembled. You have no claim on me. Elias? Elias was a monster. And you are no better. Theron, momentarily distracted by the pain, turned his furious gaze on her. You ungrateful bitch. After everything my family did for you. Did for me. Ilara's voice rose, laced with a bitterness honed by years of suffering. You mean the beatings? The endless work? The constant fear? Is that what you call kindness? She took another step forward, her eyes blazing. You speak of duty? I owed Elias nothing but contempt. And I owe you less. For the first time, Theron looked truly taken aback. He had expected a cowering, broken creature, easily intimidated. This woman, her eyes alight with a fierce, righteous anger, was a stranger to him. Silas maintained his grip, his gaze never leaving Theron, but he felt a surge of pride at Ilara's courage. She was finding her voice, her strength, right before his eyes. The only thing my brother left was debt and shame, Theron snarled, trying to regain control, his face flushing a dull red. And you, woman, are part of that inheritance. You will come with me, or I'll drag you. He made a sudden, desperate attempt to pull free, intending to reach for the whip at his belt. Silas, anticipating the move, tightened his grip further, then with a powerful, decisive movement, he twisted Theron's arm, forcing him to his knees with a cry of pain. Theron's riding crop clattered to the ground. You will not speak to her that way, Silas said, his voice like chipping stone. You will not threaten her. You will not come near her again. He pushed Theron away, sending him sprawling in the dust. Get on your horse. And ride. If I ever see your face on my land again, or anywhere near Elara, you will answer to me in a way you will not soon forget. Theron scrambled to his feet, clutching his injured wrist, his face a mask of humiliated fury and pain. He looked from Silas's implacable form to Elara's defiant stance. He saw no fear in her now, only a reflection of the strength she had drawn from the quiet man beside her. He realized he was beaten. Not by superior force of arms, but by a conviction, a moral certainty, he could not comprehend, let alone overcome. His cruelty and entitlement were no match for their united stand. He cast one last venomous glare at Elara. You'll regret this. Both of you, but his words lacked their earlier conviction. They sounded hollow, the bluster of a defeated bully. He snatched up his crop, mounted his horse awkwardly, his movement stiff with pain and resentment, and wheeled the animal around. Without another word, he galloped away, disappearing over the ridge, a dark stain receding into the twilight. Silence descended, heavy and profound. The only sounds were Elara's ragged breathing and the distant chirp of crickets. The immediate threat was gone, but the echoes of the confrontation lingered. Elara swayed, the adrenaline ebbing, leaving her weak and trembling. Silas was instantly at her side, his arm going around her, steadying her. It's over, Elara, he said gently. He's gone. She leaned against him, burying her face in his rough shirt, the scent of pine and honest sweat a comforting reassurance. Tears came then, not of fear, but of relief, of release. Years of pent-up sorrow and rage poured out of her in great, shuddering sobs. Silas held her, his hand stroking her hair, murmuring soft, comforting words. He let her cry, understanding the cleansing power of those tears. He held her as the last light faded from the sky and the first stars pricked the darkening velvet. He held her until her sobs subsided into quiet shudders, until she was spent. He felt the fragility of her in his arms, but also an emerging resilience, a core of steel that had been tempered, not broken, by her suffering. When she finally quieted, she looked up at him, her eyes swollen but clear, a profound gratitude shining in their depths. "Thank you, Silas," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved me." Again he looked down at her, his expression softening, a tenderness in his gaze that made her heart ache with a new, unfamiliar emotion. "We saved each other, Elara," he said quietly. In that moment, standing together in the twilight, the shadows of the past finally banished, something shifted between them. The unspoken words, the shared glances, the quiet acts of kindness and protection had woven a bond stronger than either of them had realized. It was a bond forged in shared adversity, tempered by mutual respect, and now, illuminated by the undeniable spark of love. He gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her tear-stained cheek, his calloused fingers surprisingly tender. His thumb lingered for a moment, a feather-light touch that sent a shiver through her. Their eyes met, and held. The air thrummed with unspoken possibilities, with the promise of a future they would now face, not as two solitary souls, but as one. The quiet ranch, once a sanctuary for a broken woman, had become something more. It had become home. And the lonely rancher, who had found a freezing widow at a desolate train station, knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that she was not just a woman he had rescued, but the woman who had, in turn, rescued him from his own solitude. She was, and would forever be, a part of his life, a part of his heart. The whispers of the town, what would they say now? Perhaps, just perhaps, the shifting chorus would begin to change its tune, witnessing not scandal, but a story of courage, and a love as steadfast and enduring as the mountains that cradled their home. For in the quiet strength of their stand, a legend was beginning to take root. The days that followed Theron's departure were imbued with a new sense of peace, a lightness that settled over the ranch like morning mist. The shadow of Elara's past had been faced, and vanquished. It was as if a heavy shroud had been lifted, allowing sunlight to flood into corners that had long been dark. Elara found herself breathing easier, sleeping more soundly. The haunted look in her eyes was almost entirely gone, replaced by a quiet serenity, and often, a soft smile that transformed her face, revealing the gentle beauty that sorrow had long obscured. She moved about her days with a newfound confidence, her laughter, when it came, as clear and bright as the creek water tumbling over stones. Silas, too, felt the change. A weight he hadn't fully realized he carried, the constant, low-level vigilance for her safety, the unspoken concern for her fragile spirit, had eased. He found himself smiling more often, a slow, unaccustomed upturn of his lips that crinkled the corners of his eyes. The quiet companionship they had forged deepened into something richer, more profound. The unspoken love that had flickered between them during the confrontation with Theron now burned with a steady, gentle flame. There were no grand declarations, no passionate avowals. Their love was like their life, built on a foundation of quiet understanding, mutual respect, and shared experience. It was in the way Silas's hand would briefly cover hers when he passed her a cup of coffee in the morning, a fleeting touch that spoke volumes. It was in the way Elara would save him the choicest piece of pie, her eyes soft as she watched him eat. It was in the comfortable silences that fell between them as they sat by the fire in the evenings, he reading, she mending, the only sounds the crackle of flames and the whisper of the wind outside. Their life together unfolded with the natural rhythm of the seasons. Spring blossomed into a vibrant summer. Elara's herb garden flourished, providing flavors for their meals and simple remedies. She planted flowers around the cabin, bright splashes of color against the weathered logs, coaxing beauty from the rugged land. Silas taught her to ride, his hands gentle as he guided her, his voice patient. She, in turn, brought a softness to his life, a warmth that permeated the once austere cabin. News of the confrontation with Theron had, inevitably, trickled down to Redemption Gulch. The narrative, however, had shifted. Henderson, the storekeeper, who had been on his way to deliver a late order to a neighboring ranch, had witnessed the final moments of Theron's humiliating retreat from a distance. His account, colored with a grudging admiration for Silas's steadfastness and Elara's unexpected defiance, began to change the tone of the town's whispers. The shifting chorus, once judgmental, now hummed with a different tune, one of respect, even awe. Herd Blackwood stood up to that bully from back east. Sent him packing with his tail between his legs, and the woman, Elara they call her, she weren't no shrinking violet neither. Spoke her mind, they say, slowly, tentatively, the community began to accept them. Mrs. Henderson, the storekeeper's wife, a woman whose opinion carried weight, made a point of stopping by the ranch one afternoon, ostensibly to deliver a small sack of sugar she claimed they'd overordered, but truly, to assess the situation for herself. She found Elara tending her flowers, her face calm, her manner gentle. She saw the quiet contentment in Silas's eyes as he watched Elara. Mrs. Henderson left, satisfied, and her subsequent pronouncements in town, a good woman, that Elara. And Silas Blackwood, he's a good man to have her, did much to cement their place. One crisp autumn evening, as the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves filled the air, Silas and Elara sat on the porch, watching the moon rise over the jagged peaks. He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. "Elara," he began, his voice a low rumble. She turned to him, her heart giving a little flutter. "Marry me." It wasn't a question so much as a simple statement of what already was, in essence, true. Their lives were inextricably bound. Their hearts, long solitary, had found their counterpart. Elara's eyes filled with tears, but these were tears of joy, of profound gratitude. "Yes, Silas," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, they were married by the circuit preacher a few weeks later, a simple ceremony held in their cabin, with Mr. and Mrs. Henderson as their witnesses. Elara wore a dress of pale blue calico she had sewn herself, a sprig of late-blooming mountain aster tucked in her hair. Silas wore his Sunday best, his usually stern face softened by a quiet happiness. Their vows were simple, heartfelt, a promise of forever whispered in the warm glow of the firelight. And so, their life together truly began, a quiet testament to love's enduring power. The years that followed were etched onto the land and into their hearts. The ranch prospered under their shared labor. Silas's herds grew, his crops yielded bountifully. Elara's touch transformed the rugged homestead into a welcoming haven. Their small cabin was expanded, room by room, to accommodate their growing family. First came a son, young Silas, with his father's steady gaze and his mother's gentle smile. Then a daughter, Martha Rose, named for the two women who had shaped Silas's heart, a spirited child with Ilara's flaxen hair and a love for the wildflowers that bloomed in the meadows. Their laughter filled the valley, a joyful sound that echoed the deep contentment of their parents. Silas and Ilara grew old together, their love deepening with each passing season, weathering storms and celebrating triumphs, side by side. Their hands, gnarled with age but still gentle, would often find each other, a silent reaffirmation of the bond that had saved them both. Their story became a local legend, a tale whispered by firesides, passed down through generations. The story of the lonely rancher who found a freezing widow at a desolate train station, and in saving her, saved himself. The story of the resilient outcast who found not just sanctuary, but love, and a forever home. They were a testament to the quiet strength of the human spirit, to the healing power of kindness, and to the enduring magic of a love that was meant to be. Their legacy was not just in the thriving ranch, or in their children and grandchildren, but in the inspiration they provided, a reminder that even in the harshest of winters, hope can take root, and love, true and steadfast, can blossom and endure forever. The wooden bird charm, once Ilara's only solace, now sat on the mantelpiece, a treasured memento, a symbol of a journey from deepest despair to profound, lasting happiness. And sometimes, on a quiet evening, as the wind whispered through the pines, one could almost hear the echo of their story, a timeless melody of love, resilience, and the enduring promise of a shared forever. And so, dear friends, our tale draws to a close. The story of Silas and Ilara, a testament to the fact that even in the most frozen of circumstances, the warmth of human connection can thaw the deepest despair. What did you feel as their journey unfolded? Did their quiet strength resonate with you? We invite you to share your thoughts, your reflections, in the comments below. Rate this story, let us know if it touched your heart, and if you haven't already, please subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss our next journey into the heart of human experience. Every like, every share, every comment helps these stories reach those who might need to hear them. Until we meet again, may you find warmth in unexpected places, and may your own stories be filled with courage, hope, and enduring love. Thank you for listening, and for being a part of our community. Be well.